What a weekend in the Champions Cup. Welcome back to the channel. Round 3 out of 4 in the pool stages done and dusted. And I think another brilliant weekend for the competition in terms of what we're seeing on the pitch. Don't get me wrong, and as I've spoken about previously on this channel, it is a competition which still has its issues, and that was evident in some matches this weekend. Maybe I'll get into that when I get on to talking about it. But overall, we once again have been delivered some brilliant games, some great storylines, and it is shaping up nicely ahead of the final round of pool fixtures, which will be coming next weekend. So welcome back to the channel. You can have your say down below. Drop a comment. How did your team do? What do you make about any of the things I touch upon in the video? And what do you think of the Champions Cup this season as a whole? As I say, in terms of the action, the actual matches, I've been really enjoying it. But we're also at the stage of the competition now with one weekend of pool fixtures still to go. But I think I'll just run through it pool by pool. That seems to me to be probably the best way to go about things. So starting off in Pool 1, Bordeaux at the top of the tree, 3 from 3, looking incredibly good. A crushing win for them against Saracens, and I will come on to that in just a second. So Bordeaux have qualified and Lyon have qualified as well. They lost their opening pool fixture away to Bristol when Bristol won it with the Callum Sheedy drop goal. Since then, they've gone back-to-back matches. Hard-fought win for them against Connacht. And then the Bulls with a really good result against Bristol, and it looks like it's going to be Bristol and Saracens and Connacht. You would have thought fighting it out for that final spot, but the Bulls not absolutely guaranteed of a place in the knockout stages, but they're pretty well placed as we head into the final weekend. So in terms of Pool 1, I was just watching the TV coverage over here in the UK, and Lawrence Dallaglio said that Saracens result is the story of the weekend. Now that's obviously got a particular English bias to it, but you can understand what he's getting at there, in that this is a Saracens team that in very recent history were multiple times winners of the Champions Cup. They're the champions of England. It's still, even though they've lost players, a real core of that team that has been so successful. But they've struggled recently in the Premiership. They've had a bit of dip in form there. And the manner of this defeat, more than anything, to Bordeaux is really fascinating, I think, for where Saracens are. Is it starting to be a transition period for this Saracens side? It's something Mark McCall actually spoke about recently when he was getting asked about the rumours linking Owen Farrell with a move abroad. He hinted at the fact that, not even hinted at, he outright said it, that this is a team that would be transitioning next year. Maybe this is further evidence of that. Now, they could still qualify. They may still qualify, but even so, the way in which they got dispatched, a 40-point defeat, 55-15. And as much as there will be concerns amongst Saracens and their supporters, Bordeaux looks seriously good in this competition. They're going well in the top 14 as well. And I think in particular at home, which is so often the case in the Champions Cup, they will be incredibly difficult to beat there. Once again, you had Biel Biarré on one wing, Penaud on the other, Luku at scrum half running the show along with Jalabert, Mofana, plus the forwards they've got. That's just mentioning the back line. They are awesome to watch, and some of the tries they scored was absolutely outstanding. Packed house once again, so well deserving of their qualification. As for Lyon, as I say, quite impressed with Lyon after their opening defeat on the opening weekend to come back, go 2 from 2. The Bulls as well, with, in fact, a great win for the Bulls, really. Away to Bristol, they rested a lot of players. They rested their Springboks. None of them were playing. Jake White was quite punchy, actually, for those of you that have seen his pre-match interview and asked about why that was, kind of talking about how he has to give Springbok players a certain amount of rest time, and people have interpreted it as some shots fired towards South African Rugby Union and towards the Springboks as an organisation. But it didn't matter. Victory against Bristol, who we saw them the week before go away to Sale, incredibly tough place to go and win and do that in the Premiership, and then they follow it up with a lacklustre display at home, really, similar to the game we saw against Exeter in the Premiership in between Christmas and New Year, where they were sloppy, they were giving the ball away. They, from their perspective, probably didn't really fire a shot, as much as it was the Bulls' power that Bristol were just not able to deal with. So good result for them. Bristol, They're sitting fourth because Saracens got beaten so heavily, so they're just above them by 1 point on points difference. It could come down to that. You've got to remember as well, Bristol got a spot in this competition because of what happened with London Irish. You feel like they're not really quite of the quality, I don't think, to be there. I feel like they shouldn't get themselves to a last 16, but maybe that victory, as I say, against Lyon will be enough for them. We'll wait and see. Connacht with just the 1 point, but you never know. Hosting Bristol, final weekend, another tough place to go and get a result. Maybe they could spring a surprise or two. Let's get into Pool 2. Toulouse, Bath, Harlequins are the teams that have qualified here. And Toulouse, I mean, they look really, really good. Over 3 games, only conceded 21 points. I think Bordeaux had conceded 20, so very slightly better. But they're scoring points. They're not conceding many. Sorry, not conceding 21. That's tries they've scored. But regardless of that, Toulouse in a really, really strong position. The big question for them is what's going to happen when they lose Antoine Dupont. Now, they've got so many brilliant players in that team that they'll still be really good, but we know how important he is to them and the impact he can have. Another outstanding performance for him. Bath on Sunday, as I'm recording today, beat Racing 92. I would say rode their luck a little bit in so much as I think most people would look at Alfie Barbary and feel like he should have been red carded in the first half. He ended up getting a red card near the end of the game for a second yellow card in the end. But the why this is, I think, a really pleasing result for Bath is because of the way they came back into it. It looked like Racing had got themselves to a relatively comfortable scoreline in the second half, and Bath were able to come back into the game. The Will Muir try, which they took really nicely fairly late on to give themselves a tiny bit of a cushion and give themselves the lead. And they've had a couple of results like this recently. Even if you look at the game against Cardiff, away to Cardiff in this competition, where it was high scoring, but it was quite a close game. They've had similar in the Premiership as well. This is a Bath side that previously were thought of as having a bit of a soft underbelly. You wouldn't be particularly threatened by them. I think they are tougher now. I think they are able to get themselves over the line in games that previously we would have seen them lose in. And that's why this is so pleasing. But for them, in that pool, to be 3 from 3, already qualified, it's a club in a great place at the moment, heading in the right direction. Great start to the Premiership season as well. And Harlequins, I mean, easy victory against Cardiff. Cardiff, kind of the reflection of where the Welsh game is in terms of the regions at the moment. It's in a difficult spot. But Harlequins going nicely. Ulster, Racing, you would have thought the ones fighting it out for that final qualification spot. Don't think Cardiff will be able to do it, but they picked up a couple of bonus points, so I suppose you never know. But yeah, Racing, 3 from 3. That defeat to Harlequins, I think, is massive. It was at the opening weekend. I think it was on the Sunday, with Harlequins going to Paris and beating them there. That could end up being key for them. For all the quality in their team, I don't know, in this competition anyway, I know they're doing all right in the top 14, doesn't really seem to be clicking. Into Pool 3, where another English club, the English clubs, I will say, have surpassed my expectations. This weekend wasn't quite as dominant for them as the opening couple. But even so, Northampton and Exeter both qualified from Pool 3. So then we've got Munster, Glasgow, Bayonne, Toulon battling out on the final weekend for those other qualification spots. Where should we start with here? This pool was mental this weekend. So Northampton Friday night, unbelievable performance against Bayonne, who rested and rotated. Going back to what I said at the start of the video, that is perhaps one of the issues with this competition. We don't see teams always needing, or maybe being able to, in some of the journeys we see to and from South Africa, naming their strongest teams. Teams are able to rotate. Bayonne did, and Northampton cut them apart. They were the clinical, dangerous, on-form Northampton, who any of you have watched the Premiership so far this season would have seen. And Bayonne were soft, didn't really provide much of an opposition, but Northampton did what they needed to do, and a 3 from 3, as are Exeter, who have had a brilliant pool. Got away with it at the end of this game. What did you all make of it? This is probably the most controversial moment. For those of you that didn't see it, Exeter score a late try. Henry Slade with a clutch conversion to give them the lead. Clock's in the red then at the other end of the pitch. Exeter have a put in at the scrum, 5 metres from their own try line. They pick it up at the base, try and kick it into touch, but is under so much pressure that doesn't get great contact on it. One of the Glasgow forwards scoops it up, scores a try, but is ultimately penalised and the try disallowed because the referee said that he got rid of his bind on the scrum, the flanker, too early, so was offside, and therefore a penalty to extra, and they won the game. If I was Glasgow, I would have felt possibly a little bit aggrieved here. I actually did think that there was maybe a penalty on Stu Townsend, the extra scrum half, rather than looking at the binding of the flanker. Either way, another comeback victory for Exeter. And I suppose in a similar vein to what I said about Bath, you could say to Exeter, this is a young Exeter side, and that is the kind of result where it wasn't a great game, actually, even though it was a really dramatic ending. I thought for both sides it was quite a scrappy game, dropped balls, not much cohesion, a bit stop-start. But for a young Exeter team to be able to get a victory there, that is such a huge learning curve for those young players to see what it takes, sometimes a bit of luck, but even so, just what it takes to get over the line in these kind of Champions Cup matches. So I thought it was brilliant for Exeter. And then Munster as well, going to Toulon. Great travelling support from Munster. They are one of the teams, if not the team, which is perhaps the most, maybe not saying the most is probably a bit too harsh, but they are one of the most synonymous teams with this competition over the years. Great support going away to Toulon. I thought they possibly messed it up earlier in the pool stages when they drew against Bayonne, but this victory has put them right in a driving seat to be able to get themselves qualified for the latter stages and for the last 16. They were brilliant in this game, really impressed with it. I caught up on it this morning actually rather than watching it live. But they've got loads of players in that team that just always seem to impress me but don't necessarily get called up for the Ireland team. I'll be interested to see what Andy Farrell does with his Six Nations squad off the back of a Munster side that won the URC. What can they do in the Champions Cup this year? And as for Glasgow, I think a story of missed opportunities, particularly the Exeter game. I think not just that chance at the end or try at the end that got disallowed. I think they had other moments in that game, in particular the first half, where they will regret not capitalising on the pressure and the phases that they were able to have. But let's finish things off into Pool 4. Leinster, as you would expect, right at the top of it. They're the only team actually in Pool 4 who have definitely qualified, which is not too surprising when this is the pool of death, isn't it? So Leinster are top, they've won all their games. Then you've got the Stormers, Leicester, La Rochelle and Sale battling it out for those other places. Great win for the Stormers. Sale actually put up a great fight here, but it was always going to be a pretty tough task going away to South Africa. Leicester getting beaten by La Rochelle, who finally got themselves a win on the board. So it all comes down to that final weekend, which is going to be fascinating. I mean, you've got Sale hosting La Rochelle on the Sunday. In terms of the other games, you've got Leicester against Leinster and Stade Francais hosting the Stormers. So what do you guys reckon is going to happen in this pool? I genuinely don't know. I think for Sale will be glad it's at home against La Rochelle. I think they would have known there was a good chance their pool stages came down to the final weekend and hosting La Rochelle. That's a massive game. That's going to be absolutely awesome. And then Leicester as well. Will Leinster rotate? Could that potentially give an opportunity to Leicester if we see Leinster rotate, going back to the fact that we do see teams chop and change just a little bit in this competition? And then the Stormers away to Stade Francais. Stade Francais at the bottom of the pool. Maybe they rotate as well and it gives the Stormers an opportunity. And do you know what? The big thing for the Stormers, I think, is getting home field advantage for the last 16. I've said it already when I've done videos on the Champions Cup. Teams going to South Africa are going to have it pretty tough, I think. Because of the journey, the South African teams have the same issue when they come up here. But I think with the Stormers, with the Bulls, we've seen those South African teams that it is not an easy thing to go down there and win away from home on one of these Champions Cup weekends. So that's kind of going through each pool. There's loads more that we could say, but there's so many games to get through in these pool stages. The same issues remain. I still think 4 teams going through from each pool is too much. I still think it's an issue, teams rotating and things like that. But it is where we are. What we have seen is some brilliant, brilliant rugby. What do you think is going to happen? What have you made of this weekend? I'll try and still do some videos on that final round of fixtures, and particularly once we know who's in the last 16. But it is going to kind of kick into Six Nations build up pretty soon. With I know England name their squad this coming week. Ireland do as well, possibly Scotland. So the focus is probably going to change towards the international rugby a bit. But drop your comment down below, like the video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.